Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, I'm looking forward to making you one of my family favorite recipes. That was just kind of a homemade concoction that I came up with one night when I had some ingredients and wasn't sure what to make for dinner. And it ended up turning into homemade meatballs and gravy with mixed vegetables and scalloped potatoes fried on the stovetop. So without further ado, let me tell you what you'll need to make this recipe. It looks a little bit complicated because of the number of elements involved, but in reality, it's just basic items, basic ingredients, and it's very, very easy to make. Total cook time is probably going to take about 45 minutes to an hour in total, including the oven, depending upon how accustomed you are to using the ingredients and stuff involved. So without further ado, here we go. For the mixed vegetable portion, I just opt usually for a bag of frozen mixed vegetables. The size here for my family of 4 is a 2-pound bag, which usually suffices as plenty. To accompany that, you're going to need a full pot of water. You don't need to pre-measure the water or anything. Just fill it about halfway, and you'll be able to boil the veggies in there without an issue. You're going to need a 8 by 11 glass pan to cook the meatballs in. 9 by 13 would also suffice, but if you are using a 9 by 13, you might want to have 2 jars of gravy instead of 1. You're going to need a skillet or a pan, preferably a large one, for the scalloped potatoes. And as far as the ingredients themselves are concerned, you are going to need a half of a yellow onion. White would also do, as you can see here. The potatoes themselves, of course, I have a 1.5 pound bag. It's a small bag of baby yellow potatoes. Those are some of my favorites, making the scalloped potatoes in this recipe. You're going to need thyme. Sorry, ladies and gents, I meant not thyme, but rather rosemary. Getting ahead of myself a little bit there. You're going to need some cooking oil for the potatoes. You could use veggie oil, maybe olive oil, unless the skillet gets too hot. I prefer to use canola oil in this case. For the meatballs themselves, you're going to need Italian seasoning, breadcrumbs, a single egg, garlic powder, unless you want to go through the trouble of cutting up or mincing some garlic cloves yourself. I use pre-made gravy, savory beef by Heinz gravy. It's really, really good stuff in this case for this recipe. And of course, my favorite pan, the avocado oil, to grease the bottom of the baking dish with, as well as a pound of ground beef. So let's get started. First, go ahead and grease up your baking pan real quick. Just get the bottoms of it fairly liberally there in preparation for the meatballs. The meatballs themselves, here we go, let's get started. Put all our ingredients together in the mixing bowl. Put in the ground beef, the egg, the onion, so that all gets in there nice and neat. Ready to mix. If you're unsure of the steadiness of your hand when entering ingredients, you could go ahead and measure out maybe about a tablespoon of garlic powder. I preferably just like to do it by eyeball. That's usually how I cook once I get really comfortable with the recipe. So I just kind of thoroughly mix garlic powder seasoning in there. You'll want to put in approximately a heaping half cup of breadcrumbs. And then last but not least, the Italian seasoning. Now again, depending upon how sure you are or not so sure of adding ingredients by eyeball, you can measure out maybe half a tablespoon of this and just kind of stir it in there. I like to do this by eyeball, just judging by my comfortability with the recipe and having done it before. So after washing your hands well, you're going to want to go ahead and mix these ingredients together by hand. So get your grubs in there, start mushing it around, making sure all the ingredients are extremely well mixed together. You don't want to leave anything caked on the side of the bowl. Kind of go mush back and forth until the onion, the breadcrumbs, the seasonings, all the components of the meatballs start to become really well ground into the beef. Want to make sure that egg is mixed up in there real well. The egg is primarily just used to make sure that the beef and the rest of the ingredients stick really well together through the remainder of cooking. So you don't want your meatballs falling apart if you don't have to. So once your ingredients are mixed really well in the bowl, you are ready to begin making your meatballs. And I don't know if you watched my enchilada meatball recipe, which if you haven't yet, you should definitely go check it out because that's also a great idea for dinner. What you should do is you should take a small amount of ground beef mixture in your hands and just start volleying it back and forth in your hands, like Grandma used to do maybe, or your parents. Just going back and forth with it, volley it up and down. Make sure it's nice and compressed until you get a perfectly round meatball. Look at that, you can tell that there's onion chunks mixed in there, that all the ingredients are well mixed together. And your meatball diameter should be somewhere around maybe an inch to inch and a half. And if you like really large meatballs, go ahead and make them 2 inches or even a bit bigger, but you're gonna have to make sure that they get cooked thoroughly in the middle. So try to keep the size relatively reasonable. So again, mixing our meatballs together, just volley them back and forth in your hands. Get comfortable with the feeling of it. Look at that, a perfectly shaped meatball ready to go in the oven. So you put those in your 8.5 by 11 baking dish. And voila. After you're done forming your meatballs, you should end up with somewhere between 12 to 16 meatballs, depending upon the size that you made. In an 8.5 by 11 glass pan, you end up with a perfect amount of space between the meatballs. Give them enough room that the gravy can drop in there and let them cook inside and simmer inside the gravy for about 45 minutes in the oven. So let's get that process started right now. You want to go ahead and set your oven on bake, and when it asks you temperature, go ahead and set that puppy to 325 and get it preheated. All right, with those meatballs preparing to go in, go ahead and get your skillet ready for your potatoes. You don't have to measure out the oil either. What you want to do is you want to coat the bottom slightly. I just kind of eyeball it again because of my level of comfortability with cooking in this regard, but you can use about maybe 2 tablespoons of oil. And what you should do is coat the bottom of the pan evenly and get it prepped for nonstick and frying of the potatoes. All right, meatballs are just about ready to go into the oven. It's just about ready to done preheating. So go ahead and coat your meatballs with the gravy. I have a 12-ounce jar of pre-made beef gravy, which I find works best for this recipe. Some of you do-it-yourselfers out there maybe want to try and make your own gravy and add more of a home-cooked touch to it. But when you're in a pinch for dinner and you need something easy like this but still feels home-felt, this is a perfect way to go. Notice how I'm just kind of coating across all the meatballs, making sure they're nice and covered. There we go. Let the gravy slide down in there just like that. Make sure they're all coated. There, that's perfect. Make sure I get all the gravy out there. Don't want to waste any. Sometimes I turn this into a bath. I'll take a really large jar of gravy, or maybe 2 jars of gravy, and I'll kind of fill up the baking dish halfway and let them boil inside the gravy. Really, really good. Okay, so in regards to preparation of the potatoes, you just want to go ahead and take your small baby potatoes, put them on your cutting board, and just start making thin slices out of them. I usually like to cut them about a 1/4 inch thick. I call them scalloped potatoes. I mean, are they really scalloped? I mean, they might be a little bit thinner, but end result is they should be like really, really thick chips, about a 1/4 inch thick. Just leave the skins on. I mean, unless you really have an aversion to the potato skins. These small yellow baby potatoes are really delicious, and the skin is not coarse at all. It's real smooth. They're real fine. It's nice and light. It's real easy to eat. So I don't find anything, no real need to take off the skins. And besides, the skins are where the vitamins and minerals are in the potatoes anyway. Don't really want to take it off. All right, so let's go ahead and finish getting these ready. All right, and there you go. A nice pile of potatoes that are ready to go into your skillet. In the meantime, the preheated oven dinger just went off. Go ahead and let's open that up. Take our meatballs, slide them right in there on the center rack, right in the middle of the oven, where it cooks the best evenly. Alexa, set timer for 45 minutes.
45 minutes, starting now.
All right, let's get the potatoes in the skillet ready to go. Okay, so for this, you are going to want a regular size spatula to start flipping these with once they get hot. And you are going to want to turn your dial for heat on just over medium. Have it maybe about 5/8 of the way up, between 5 and 6. So slightly over medium. This is an electric stove, so it's going to take a little while to ramp up, and these will probably take the better part of the 45 minutes that it's going to take the meatballs to cook. You want these to turn golden brown on the sides, and then you'll know they're ready. All right, our potatoes have really started sizzling well, so now's the time to add the rosemary. Rosemary really adds a good flavor to the potatoes. Just go ahead and start sprinkling on. Apply it kind of liberally. The thing about the rosemary is some of it's going to fall off when you start stirring the potatoes around, so you want to apply a little bit more than you know you're probably going to eat. So that was my first dash. Let's take a good close look. See how the potatoes are covered real nice? So you want to grab your spatula, start moving them around a little bit, and start flipping them. Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's real good. Just a tad more rosemary. Make sure all the bare spots are covered. And that should be it. So with our meatballs in the oven and the potatoes in the works, now it's time to come over to our pan full of water, grab our mixed veggies, and just go ahead and dump them in. All right. And you're going to want to set that heat on high. Just ramp it up rapidly to get that water boiling, and the veggies, to get them soft and thoroughly cooked, probably take about 15 minutes or so. I like to let them boil. I'll ramp the heat back once they get really going. Go ahead and stir those potatoes up some more. Lost one. There we go. So, after a little while of frying, you can really start to see that some of these potatoes are starting to turn a golden brown. They're not all finished yet, and you want to keep stirring them up to make sure they all get cooked evenly, but they are well on their way. Don't want to let any of them stick if you don't have to. Yeah, look at those. All right. So at this point, we have about 25 minutes to go on the meatballs, and the potatoes are looking really good. So what I did was I turned down the heat on them a little bit to like about a 4.5. Let me show you these guys here. Really good. See the current condition that they're in. See how they're turning a nice golden brown? They're not too far from being ready. So I'm going to let them go for a little bit yet And again, I turned that heat down to right around 4, so less than half at this point. Okay, so here we are at the 15-minute mark with the meatballs left to cook, and the potatoes are pretty much set. So I went ahead and shut the burner off, and I'm just going to let the potatoes continue to simmer here on that burner so that they stay nice and hot for when the meatballs are ready to serve up. Alexa, dismiss. All right, ladies and gentlemen, with that, our meatballs should be ready. Let's pop open the oven door, look inside. Oh yeah, absolute perfection. All right, get my mid on, pull those puppies out. Out of the oven they come. And we are ready to serve up. Got your boiling veggies, the potatoes which are finished. Excellent looking meatballs. And ladies and gentlemen, voila. This is your final product. Guten Appetit. Enjoy your meal.